Welcome to the next podcast with Jay Cookingham, a heartfelt journey through grief, loss, and healing. After the devastating loss of his wife, Christine, Jay shares his raw, honest reflections on navigating life without her. This podcast explores the power of grief as a medicine that teaches resilience, invites lament, and leads us to discover God's presence during sorrow. With grace and vulnerability, Jay offers hope and encouragement to those walking through grief, reminding us that we're not alone on this journey of healing.
Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the next podcast, where I share some thoughts about learning how to navigate, embrace, explore, and learn to trust as we move forward with grief and loss. I'm your host, Jay Cookingham, and I'm so thankful that you decided to listen in today. And today is rather tender ground for me as I navigate my own grief journey. This episode is being released just after June 5th, a date marked deeply in my heart. What would have been my 43rd wedding anniversary with my bride, Christine. And here's something I've learned, and maybe I'm still learning about walking with grief, how it shows up on the calendar and how it messes with your day when it does. There are dates that don't let go of you. Anniversary, birthdays, diagnosis, death days, holidays. It's kind of what I call calendar grief, because all these numbers, they carry meaning, and they can hit like a tidal wave, like a ton of bricks when they do hit. So let's start with the number I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, the number 43. It's a prime number if you're dealing with equations and such, but it's also a prime reminder of what was and who is missing and what could have been. For me, this number echoes along with a lot of other sacred numbers, and like the number 37, because it was 37 years of covenant marriage that I had with Christine. And I'll be honest, these numbers don't always sit right with me. They mess with me as I grieve them. And like everybody, my sacred numbers show up on calendars and cards, birthday cards, anniversary cards, love notes, love letters, time-stamped photos and videos, and of course, all my memories. They speak a strange math of love and loss. And I have never liked math. In school, I hated math. But these days, it seems like all I have left is numbers. And I long to make sense of the history behind them and what has happened since those numbers stopped. I know now why Psalm 90 verse 12 speaks to me so much. That verse says, "Teach us to number our days, that we might gain a heart of wisdom." It's a beautiful passage. And this passage encourages reflection on the limited time that we actually have on this planet and the importance of living that life with purpose and intentionality. And as I reflect and think and pray about this scripture, that perspective here helps me move forward and love life again, as difficult as it is some days. And it helps me deal with these difficult numbers and calendar grief. And it helps me deal with them with wisdom. Because these numbers, when seen through God's insight and perspective, they become sacred markers to me, measurements of a life connected to my bride, and the pain of remembering them becomes purposeful. I don't just see the loss, I see love. Because these numbers, these calendar dates, they don't just measure time. They measure love. They measure the space someone filled, and yes, the ache they leave behind. They tell stories, though. They tell stories of that life, and they remind me of how much we were meant for each other, how much Christine and I were made for each other, and how God orchestrated all those numbers together. So let me tell you a wild story to illustrate this point. A wild part of our story, how Christine and I met, and this happened way before we even met, which is an amazing part of our story. When I was 17, I was living in a home that was filled with abuse and pain, and I came close to ending my life on multiple occasions. I didn't fully understand why then, but I was in a spiral of despair, and I was throwing my life away by the bad choices I was making at the time. I knew God, I believed in God, but I was running away from God at that time in my life. Around the same time, 60 miles away in a little town of Valhalla, New York, Christine was just a teenager, but she felt compelled by God to pray for her future husband who was in danger of losing his life. She didn't know me, and I didn't know her. In fact, we wouldn't meet for 7 more years after this. Christine wasn't thinking about getting married at that time. She was actually thinking about becoming a nun. So this request by God didn't make sense to her. But she obeyed. She obeyed the nudge of the Spirit. And I believe with all my heart that her prayers saved my life. And 9 years later, we were married. Those are crazy numbers, aren't they? But that moment, the moment that Christine was praying for me without knowing me, reminds me that God has always been involved in the details, in the numbers, embedded in those numbers, even though the ones that didn't make sense at the time. And I think that's what grief so often disrupts, our sense of meaning in the math, in the numbers. Because often in grief, the numbers don't seem to add up. Years cut short, anniversaries left uncelebrated, time measured more by absence than presence. But if I've learned anything, is this. While grief marks our calendars with sorrow, God can reinterpret those numbers for us. He can turn them into sacred reminders, not of what we've lost, but of how deeply we were loved and how closely He walks with us even when the equation breaks down. I've shared this before, but it keeps on coming back to me. Dealing with heartache, dealing with suffering, dealing with sorrow is not a question of faith to me. It's a question of love. And that's what I realized again when I stared down that number marked in the box of June 5th on the calendar. What would have been our 43rd anniversary. I know my faith isn't broken, but sometimes I wonder about my love for God. That's what feels fractured at times. Not because He's failed, but because my grief sometimes messes with my intimacy with Him. And what I love about this is, you know what God says to me in those moments? When I feel like He's crowding me, and when the dates on the calendar are messing with me, I don't feel condemnation. I don't feel correction. Just kindness coming from Him. And just this simple phrase that I hear Him say to me is, Jay, I miss you. And that always breaks me, because even when the numbers don't add up, even in grief, even in the numbness, God still longs for my heart. Even when it feels like it's far away from Him, He longs for me to be close. He reminds me of who I am to Him. And when grief makes you question who you are, it's essential to return to the truth. And John 1:12 reminds us that to all who receive Him, He gave the right to become children of God. He gave us the right, the authority, the freedom to become His sons and daughters. What a promise. And grief, especially calendar grief, has a way of testing my identity. It doesn't just hit my heart, it hits my sense of belonging. But when we bring our lament before God, something holy and sacred happens. We get to lament as sons and daughters from a place of belonging, from a place of closeness. I love that. It's not a weakness to lament and cry out from our pain. It's worship. It's trust. It's remembering who God is and who we are still to Him, even when the dates and the anniversaries echo more pain than joy. These numbers that I call sacred: 37 years of marriage, 39 years of knowing Christine, and 43 years that we could have celebrated together. But these numbers are not just part of my grief. To me, they're sacred markers of love, slices of my life that speak of God's faithfulness to me. They don't always make sense in the world's math, but in God's grace, they just add up differently. They are evidence of a life that was full, messy, beautiful, and real. And though I can't add new calendar memories with Christine to my life, God continues to reinterpret these sacred numbers for me, not just as reminders of sorrow, but as moments of grace and growth. 1 Peter 5:10 reminds me, it says, "After you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will Himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you." And that's where I'm standing now. I am still grieving. Of course I am. But I'm also still growing. I'm still doing the math with God and being restored bit by God. Over time, I've learned a few ways to carry the weight of calendar grief and how to face those dates on the calendars with intentionality and grace. I'd like to share a few of them with you. The first one is to name that date. Don't hide from it. Ignoring it doesn't take away its power. It often gives it more power. I mark that date, sometimes even saying it out loud to whoever who will listen. Today would have been our 43rd anniversary. Naming it has a way of reclaiming it, of saying, this mattered to me. It helps me take back some of the emotional ground and invite God into the space that grief wants to occupy alone. And this is a good thing to do. Name the date. Don't hide from it. And number two is to create a rhythm of remembrance. You don't have to plan something elaborate, but intentionality matters. Do something that connects you to the story that you shared. Example, write a letter to your missing loved one. Visit a meaningful place that you both loved going to. Look through photos or other objects that bring those memories back to life. For me, something creative. I record a podcast like I'm doing now, or I write a social media post called Current Mood, and that's my way of grieving out loud on purpose. What I did to celebrate the 43rd, what would have been my 43rd wedding anniversary, is that I went back to the church that we got married at 43 years ago. It's the first time that I've actually stepped into that building that we rented all those years ago, and I got just to sit there alone in the sanctuary and took some pictures and prayed and did something that Christine and I did throughout our wedding ceremony was worship God. We had a lot of worship music played at our ceremony. And so that was the last thing I did when I left that sanctuary on June 5th. I worshiped God. It was the way that I chose to remember and to create another rhythm of remembrance. And it was beautiful, and it was helpful. And then number three is let the emotion come. Let all of it come. Whatever you're feeling, the sadness, you're feeling the laughter or the joy, the confusion, the gratitude, give yourself permission to feel without apologizing. There's no right way to be or to feel on a hard day. And just because you're crying one day doesn't mean that your faith is any less on that day. Tears are not a betrayal of trust in God. They're just a testament of love and that you're human. Okay, number four, just talk to God about it. Bring all this to God. Tell Him what the date means to you. I know He knows. He does know what that date means to you. But lament that date with Him. Rejoice in His provision of care and compassion. Ask the hard questions. Cry out your prayers. It is all prayer and worship when we're honest and we direct it towards God. It's all worship when it's rooted in love. Because when you speak from your broken heart, you're still speaking to the Father, and He wants to hear what's on your heart, your mind, your spirit. Bring it all to God. Talk to God about it. And number five, tell someone else. Tell a trusted friend or a family member saying, hey, just a heads up, this week might be a little heavy for me. Could you pray for me? That's not weakness, that's wisdom. It opens the door for support and gives others permission to grieve honestly alongside of you. And there is strength in shared sorrow. Number 6, remember and repeat what is true. You're still loved. You are still seen. You are still walking with a God who never misses a date. Even when others forget, or maybe don't understand why this day matters to you. He knows. He understands. He is so near. And when the numbers don't add up, he can give a new meaning for us. So yes, 43 is a number that's important to me. And I wish that Christine and I got to celebrate it together as a happily married couple holding hands, walking on our favorite beach in the Outer Banks. I wish that with all my heart. But instead, I mark it in my memory. I mark it in love. And I mark it with gratitude. In gratitude for a woman who truly loved me with everything that she was. And there was this phrase that she used to end her letters with. And it's just this very simple phrase. She would write, I love you to life. And she did that indeed. She loved me to life over and over again. And I am very grateful that God brought us together all those years ago in such a miraculous way. And I worship him for Christine and her impact on my life and all the years that we shared together. I miss her. I wish she was here. I wish we could add more memories to the calendar. Yes, I do. But I do worship the God who gave me my wife. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it very much that you did. And if this episode spoke to you, please leave a comment and maybe share it with someone who may be dealing with their own calendar grief today. Remember, God is good. God is always good. And he always answers out of his goodness. And sometimes he redoes the math for you. God bless you. And I'll see you next time on the next podcast.